Hey everybody, Papa Todd again. Thanks for joining me today out here at a local place, a lake everybody likes to come out to and do a little bit of fishing. And the cicadas are out strong today for sure, making a lot of noise, but it's a beautiful day. It's actually not too bad as long as you're in the shade with a little bit of a breeze, which we got today, so that's nice. And one of my previous videos, I talked a little bit about folks getting out into the woods and loss prevention, and this time of year a lot of people are taking everybody's going on vacation, and you're getting in some wild places, which is great. It's beautiful out, and it's that time of year. Sometimes we're prepared, sometimes we get in a hurry. We don't always take the precautions we should, the little extra steps, so to speak, to kind of plan a little bit better. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. If we accidentally get out in the woods and realize we may have overstepped our bounds, and we may be paying the price a little bit for not being prepared. Especially if we have kids, we sometimes let them kind of run off and explore down the trails. We discussed that in that previous video I'm talking about. And if it turns into a situation where you literally need to hunker down a little bit and you need to stay warm, I wanted to talk about just some basic shelters, simple shelters, nothing super complicated. But one of the key things to remember about shelters is if you're going to keep it simple, you got to remember we don't need fire. We can't sometimes make fire. And therefore, we've got to have a shelter that's tried and true and proven, even in those situations. Some of the challenges we have today in modern society is we rely so much on technology, and we lack the skill to actually do anything different if we don't have that technology waiting for us or helping us. True resourcefulness comes from being prepared versus having the technology and thinking it's always going to be there for us. And in an emergency situation, we find ourselves lacking the skill and lacking the resource all at the same time. Having that skill makes you prepared for that crisis versus having the tech dependence. So let's talk about shelter in a way that helps us in a situation like that. There's a lot of natural shelters out there, and people think, that's the place I, want to build a permanent shelter in. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. Natural shelters are okay, but more on a temporary type basis. The main reason why natural shelters are a deterrent, the number one reason, most of the time you're going to need a fire to keep warm in a natural shelter. Be it a cave, be it a natural shelter like a windbreak, things like that. All of those things are great for temporary ability to stay out of the wind or the rain. All of those things help you, in an immediate situation, but not if you're going to be there for any length of time. So a natural shelter is not a place you want to sleep. Think of a natural shelter as just a temporary reprieve from a particular event. Maybe a snowstorm, rainstorm, something like that, high winds, things like that. When we think about location sites, a bad shelter in a good location can still be a fairly good shelter. A good shelter in a bad location is still a bad shelter. So when you're doing a site selection, you definitely want to keep a few key things in mind. One of those is bodies of water like the one behind me now. You want to be at least 50 yards away. You got to remember these bodies of water, especially when it's cool, carry a lot of moisture in the area. So trying to get up and away from that moisture is crucial, kind of important. You don't want to be waking up feeling wet and cold. We're looking for ways to increase our odds of survival. So site location is very important. And being able to look at the site and know what you're looking at is also very important. The number one thing we're looking for in a site, plenty of material. We want to build this with material that's close, especially if we're injured or we have the ability to be injured, which is almost always in a survival situation. So being close to the material you need is crucial for sure. What do we want to avoid? Widowmakers, number one. Dead trees with dead limbs in them, or even live trees with dead limbs in them up high, that in a windstorm or something like that could ultimately break free, come down, and injure you in some way. or break your shelter. And knowing your wind directions that time of year is going to help you a lot to be sure that, you could see what direction that tree would fall. Rising water. So areas where water can rise, small creeks can swell significantly. So you can kind of look at the headwater size up on a bank to really you can really see how high the water can get. You obviously want to be beyond that or significantly further if at all possible. Being near water is great, but we just don't want to be too close to water. Some places in the country have mudslides, rock slides, lots of things like that. We obviously want to stay away from those potential areas. Be up more on a ridge, a high spot where the water is not going to be an issue. Therefore, the slide's not going to be nearly as bad of an issue. Thick forest, super thick forest is very wet and can be very cumbersome when it comes to trying to dry out or keep your shelter dry and insulated. An east-facing slope is always great, or an east-facing location on the tree line is always good because then you get the early morning sun right away. So you're getting warmed up as quickly as possible. Therefore, you're not having to, wait until the afternoon. That's always a good idea to have your shelter door kind of facing out towards the east and get the earliest sun you can. Other things to avoid would be the center of a field. We know lightning likes the top of hills, and lightning also likes the center of a field. So don't be the only thing out in the middle of the field. Always keep an eye out for poisonous plants, poisonous insects, things like that. If you can avoid setting up where you might have some, an anthill or two, or even some nests as far as wasps or bumblebees, things like that. I'm going to try to avoid those at all costs. So as I mentioned before, the materials is key, and mainly because of the economy of movement. We're trying to preserve our energy as much as possible. So keeping those materials that we need to grow or to build the shelter is extremely important. We might want to add on to that, build a little bit of a lean-to situation. So we've got an area where we can stay out of the weather, but still do a little bit of work without being in the rain, things like that. So you might want to add on to it. And sometimes you need to continue maintenance on it. Hopefully you're not stuck in the situation where that's the case, where you're found quickly. But if not, you might need to maintain that shelter a little bit. So don't have limited materials when you choose a location. And when it comes to that material, dry vegetation, obviously you need about a third less of that material because it has better insulation properties. Should you only have green materials available, you can still use it, absolutely. It'll still shed water, but you need about 2/3 more material to create the insulation factor versus the dry materials. So kind of the number one shelter out there for a survival situation is a debris hut. It's a small shelter. It's a one-person shelter. It's designed to use your own body heat to ultimately protect you and keep you warm. Insulation properties are key, and the debris on the ground is what you need. Let's start with the construction of the debris hut. The very first thing we're looking for is a ridge pole. And that ridge pole needs to be as long as you plus your arm. So if you held your arm above your head all the way, and you walked up to a pole that you could find that's either a standing tree or one that you can take down, that's about the length that you want. Obviously, it needs to be strong enough to hold your weight. So put it on something that you can stand on it and make sure it's not going to break under your own weight. And that should be enough to be able to hold the amount of debris that you're going to be putting on it. The next step is to create either a tripod or find a stump, or you can even lash it to a tree. I don't really like the trees. It's real hard to insulate a tree, and water tends to run down it, and can come into your shelter. But if you created a tripod, that would be great. The ability to hold that ridge pole up. You want that ridge pole height at about inseam height on your pants. So that's as tall as you want it. Again, we're trying to keep this space as small as possible because we don't want to have to heat a bunch of space in that area. So we want to keep it small. Next, you lay down under that ridge pole and basically about 8 inches around your body, lay some twigs. And that's going to be a perimeter drawing basically of your body. And then you're going to start setting what we call ribs. And these are smaller, less than wrist size sticks that would lean up against like this. And the bottom of the stick lands near where your twigs are. So it's outlining your body and it's keeping it nice and close and tight. It's gonna be a really tight area, but for good reason. We want to insulate just as much as possible. A couple things when you're laying down, you want to be sure that your feet are not too close to that ridge pole. If they are, you can always put something underneath the ridge pole to kind of elevate it a little bit, or just move your body back up closer to where your door is going to be at the high point. You want to ensure that the ribs do not extend past the ridge pole. We don't want them sticking up way past it because it's going to be a place for water to be able to run down. We want all that insulation completely covered. So you basically want all those ribs to stop right at that ridge pole. They don't have to be perfectly tight, those ribs. They can be 3 to 4 inches apart. It's okay. So, if you're low on material, it's a good reason to, go ahead and space it out a little bit. Not a problem there, especially if you have other good materials there. Well, I had to leave late. Finished my work for the day. And now I'm back home. So I thought I'd wrap up my thoughts on the debris hut. One of the key things that you want to keep in mind on a debris hut is it's got to be thick enough to keep you warm. And a good rule of thumb, believe it or not, is about 2 feet thick for 32 degrees. You might have to go up to 3 feet thick or more when you get down to 0, maybe 4 feet by the time you actually get, like 10 below 0. But it's very possible to use the correct types of insulation and protected in such a way that it will keep you warm enough. One thing you're definitely going to want to do is plug that doorway with as much debris as possible. You can kind of fashion a door plug if you wanted to. Building the door is kind of a nice little art. And you can kind of extend it similar to an igloo, like a little channel, so to speak, that you wiggle back down into. And so that goes a long ways to keeping that shelter much warmer during super cold time frames. The debris hunt is actually a pretty fun weekend outing for kids. Believe it or not, teaching kids how to build shelter is super easy, super fun. You just got to keep it exciting for them. You want to make it like building a hideout, right? Or building a castle. You work with what you got as far as materials go, but you just keep it exciting for them. Make it very adventurous. Go out, have the spot kind of picked out where there's plenty of material, gather things up and start saying, hey, we can do this and we can do that. They love it. I mean, build one officially for yourself, and then have them climb inside after they're kind of used to it already. It's so fun, and it'll stick in their mind as something is more fun situation versus a survival situation. It won't be scary, and you don't really need to even approach the scary side of this, the side of getting lost and all that. They have the ability to understand what it was. And maybe you rebuild it 2 or 3 times, tear it down, disperse it, put it back. Maybe a year after a year, you just keep rebuilding the same shelter over and over. And it becomes imprinted in their mind, and they're able to understand how it goes together by the time you've built it a couple of times. You always want to add a story to the equation too, talk about some Native American story, talk about somebody who may have gotten lost and ultimately found, all because of the shelter that they had. Native American stories are pretty enticing. A child gets captivated by Native American stories, and when they kind of start to understand that they lived without any technology whatsoever, they kind of can start to really appreciate a little bit more what it meant to survive back then. You can work in some details, if they ever found themselves lost and they knew that maybe it was going to get dark soon or weather was moving in, but they understood these basics enough to be able to take action themselves and protect themselves. But the real key is the questions and allowing them to work out the answers. That's the key. You've got to implement problem solving in their minds. They've got to figure it out. Even if they guess wrong, that's okay. but guide them slightly to those points in which they're going to be able to start to put things together on their own. Good problem solving learned at a young age goes a long way to making sure that they have the strongest chance of survival. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's topic. If you've got some questions or comments, please go ahead down below and leave me a message. Love to speak more to it, and I appreciate you being here today. Like and subscribe for me if you can. That goes a long ways to helping me do more videos, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.